Auckland, also known as the City of Sails, is a vibrant harbour city nestled between the Tasman Sea and the Hauraki Gulf. Surrounded by water, the city boasts a strong sailing culture, with over 500,000 pleasure boats moored across its many marinas and harbours, and the sight of sailboats cruising a daily occurrence. But amidst the ferries, flocking tourists and commuters across Auckland's arteries, a larger ocean-going fleet of cargo ships carrying essential goods, medicines and produce navigate to and from one of the world's most isolated countries. Even here, a more sinister war is at play between New Zealand police and global OCGs as local law enforcement battles to paralyse the supply chains and arrest the conspirators poisoning New Zealand's communities. As Jared Savage of the New Zealand Herald opined, with the world awash with drugs, an increasingly large amount is being sent to New Zealand. The market here is saturated, flooded with methamphetamine and other drugs. Increasingly, record shipments to New Zealand's shores are arriving on legitimate cargo, as Detective Inspector Tom Gollan of the National Organised Crime Group commented. Piggybacking involves controlled drugs being loaded into a container of permitted products in an effort to avoid law enforcement. Kiwi Cops playing whack-a-mole across the country as they try to close down trafficking routes and catch smugglers real-time, with the average price of a gram now the cheapest it's ever been in New Zealand. The battle for supply rages. Orchestrated by Mexican cartels and Southeast Asian organised crime groups. The cartels working hand in glove with outlaw motorcycle groups such as the Comancheros, Mongols and other 501s, paired up with international and local bikie gangs. All this despite New Zealand Customs and Police announcing record-breaking drug busts year on year since 2021 and having consistently seized over 1,500 kilograms of meth annually for the last 3 years, a threefold increase in recovered totals between 2017 and 2019. In this episode of Pacific Crime TV, we take you back to the summer of 2019 and the wild story of two British drug mules, so-called bit part players, who got in way over their heads down under, turning their families' lives upside down. We revisit how New Zealand Police executed the sting codenamed Operation Essex, launched in conjunction with the National Drugs Bureau, AFP, and Queensland Police. Thanks for watching Pacific Crime TV. Please remember to subscribe, like, and enable notifications so you never miss a new release, providing you insight on the shocking murders, underworld hits, and organised crime groups shaking our cities. Chapter 1. Essex Boys. In a tactical raid in early August, police executing a search warrant stormed an Auckland CBD apartment complex and recovered a staggering 200 kilograms of methamphetamines of exceptional purity. Stuffed inside cardboard boxes were plastic storage containers located inside wardrobes. The substances carried a purported street value of approximately $144 million. As Detective Inspector Paul Newman of the National Organised Crime Group lauded his team's efforts, he revealed that a 60-year-old man, British tourist Neil John Wilkinson, living in Thailand, had been detained inside the property, charged with possession of methamphetamine and intent to supply. Days later, Detective Newman in a media call would provide further updates on the case. The inspector confirmed that another British national, James Edward Woodley, also resident in Thailand, was arrested at Auckland Airport on August 4th as he tried to flee the country in connection with the case. He arrived in Auckland on May 20th from Bali, just weeks ahead of Wilkinson. Newman also relayed a sobering statistic to the huddled press pack stating, "Wastewater analysis indicated New Zealanders are using about 16 kilograms of methamphetamine a week, meaning the quantity seized in the bust was equivalent to circa 4 months of national methamphetamine consumption." As the arrested pair went through the motions in Paramaribo, New Zealand's maximum security prison, further information began to spill into the public domain on who Wilkinson and Woodley were working for and what they were caught up in. Chapter 2. A Queensland Connection. Mere days after the arrest of Wilkinson and Woodley, a joint statement from the AFP and the UK's National Crime Agency, released on August 15th, announced that Queensland Police had seized 766 kilograms of MDMA powder at an address in Loganlea, a suburb 30 kilometres south of Brisbane, in late July, and at another unnamed premises in northern New South Wales. It was the largest ever seizure in the state and the third largest in Australian history. Police also suspected they had narrowly avoided recovering another circa 400 kilos of product moved by the gang just days earlier. A further 2 British men were taken into custody in Queensland, while a 51-year-old Australian woman and 40-year-old man were also detained. Police also recovered cash to the tune of $108,000 and seized a number of vehicles and drugs at the 2 locations. Detective Superintendent John Wacker of the Queensland Command's Drug and Serious Crime Group commented on the investigation, believing the Trans-Tasman Syndicate were planning to dilute the Australian cargo to make between 6 and 12 million capsules with MDMA, the active ingredient in ecstasy tablets, and the recovered product found to have a high purity of 72%. With the 6-strong gang in custody, it wouldn't be until March 2020, in court documents tendered by Queensland Police's Financial Crime Unit at Brisbane High Court, that confirmation came of Woodley and Wilkinson's alleged links in a wider syndicate. James Woodley, already on remand in New Zealand, was questioned by Queensland Police on suspicion of alleged involvement in possession and supplying of MDMA from locations in Brisbane CBD and southeast Queensland. Woodley had continued to protest his innocence from the point of arrest up until those Australian revelations. Finally, on 11th of March, at Auckland High Court, in a pre-trial hearing, Woodley relented in the hopes of a more favourable sentence. As both men went before the court separately, the Crown prosecution teams readied to provide the compelling evidence that would send the English duo down. Chapter 3. Trial and Sentencing. James Edward Woodley was sentenced to 9 years and 7 months in early June 2020 for his role in the enterprise. In stark contrast to sentencing, Crown Prosecutor Kirsten Loomis had sought a starting point of 24 to 25 years imprisonment for Woodley to reflect his managerial role in the operation. He had arrived in Auckland on May 20th, telling custom officers he was in the country to tour the islands by camper van with a friend. In reality, all lies. Woodley in the country to provide logistics and financial support to the trafficking crew. Woodley checked into the Shakespeare Hotel in the heart of Auckland CBD, booking rooms and cars for him and another British national, also resident in Thailand, Ashley Kevin Cooper. Woodley paying for these with wads of cash. Ashley Cooper was one of the men subsequently arrested in Australia over the recovery of the circa $90 million MDMA recovery that took place in Queensland and New South Wales. Auckland court evidence revealing Woodley and Cooper were in frequent contact via an encrypted phone messaging app, going by the pseudonyms of Fatboy Slim and Flat Earth. In text transcripts detailed to court, Woodley was identified to use a series of coded words and messages to attain updates on consignments and fellow gang members' whereabouts. Defence lawyer Ron Mansfield admitted Woodley's offending was serious and on a commercial scale, but pleaded mitigation as he explained, "Mr. Woodley is the most unlikely person to get caught up in this activity. He's in his 50s, in a long-term relationship and the father figure of 2 children. He's lived an ordinary life, is not someone who's moved in the underground or been involved in criminal offending all his life and worked his way up. Rather, a grave family tragedy that affected Woodley's mental health drove him to using alcohol and drugs, which amassed him in debt. Woodley was then drawn in by his recruiters, and for his role in the scheme he received a mere fee of 15,000 Australian dollars. Woodley pressing the self-destruct button on his freedom and family life for a pittance. And Woodley, who was recruited by a syndicate in England, Justice Davison at Auckland High Court had no remorse for, as he lamented the criminal for recklessly involving himself for quick cash and with no concern whatsoever for the many people's lives and families which would be seriously harmed and in many cases destroyed. Passing sentencing remarks, the judge said the Brits' offending was a heartless and calculated exploitation of society's most vulnerable people. Woodley would be eligible for release after serving 50% of his sentence and be deported. Later that autumn, in November 2020, a jury found Neil Wilkinson guilty on one charge of possession of methamphetamine for supply. This, despite the protests of defence lawyer Annabelle Ives that Wilkinson was essentially a cog in the wheel, did not know what was inside the boxes, that he had played a very minor role in the scheme and travelled to New Zealand on the instructions of others. Conjecture by Ives, he was essentially a babysitter of the products, a family man, and that the charges brought against him were out of character for a man with a prior clean record, a view challenged by Crown Prosecutor Kirsten Loomis, who believed Wilkinson was fueled by nothing more than financial gain, stating, "Mr. Wilkinson has travelled here specifically for the purposes of becoming involved in a drug operation." At the High Court of Auckland on February 10, 2021, Justice Paul Davison sentenced Wilkinson to 17 years and 6 months, with a minimum term of 7 years and automatic deportation on sentence completion. The original Seizure's street value later revised down at sentencing to approximately $27 million. Judge Davison scolded Wilkinson for his involvement in a racket that tried to bring illicit drugs, which could bring immense social and human costs to the Kiwi community, as he found Wilkinson's actions as a custodian of the drugs. You were playing an essential role in the overall operation. Upon Wilkinson's sentencing, in a further update to media from Detective Inspector Paul Newman, he praised the efforts of a global investigations network comprising the National Organised Crime Group, Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, New South Wales Police Force, Queensland Police, Australian Federal Police, Australian Border Force, the UK's Department of Home Affairs Intelligence Division, and the UK National Crime Agency. Newman cautioned cartels will continue to seek to do business in New Zealand's lucrative market. However, with him conceding, to give you an example, a kilo of methamphetamine sourced in Mexico costs around $5,000. Over here, that's retail $150,000. This makes us a very attractive destination of choice for international drug dealing syndicates. Chapter 4. Queensland Calling. With Wilkinson not eligible for release until at earliest 2028, the case would once again covet local media attention in December 2024. As the pair whittled away the days in prison, it was revealed Queensland Police had served an arrest warrant for James Woodley on May 6, 2023. By May of 2024, he was eligible for parole and returned to the UK. However, in a parole hearing held in September, it was confirmed that Australia had formally sought the extradition of Woodley. Queensland detectives finally got their man on December 13th, with a Napier District Court judge agreeing to his extradition. Woodley charged by Australian authorities with possession and intent to supply large quantities of MDMA in Brisbane over March 13 and May 1, 2019. Woodley appeared in person before a Brisbane magistrates court on Wednesday, February 5, 2025, where he made no application for bail and was remanded in custody. And as Woodley awaits his day of reckoning with Australian law enforcement over his role in Queensland's largest ever MDMA seizure, he does so knowing many of his alleged conspirators in the same scheme are adjusting to life and long stretches behind bars. Next up on the channel, we take you inside the Queensland importation plan, the smugglers, and how police busted a major international organised crime group that put the major players behind bars for more than 50 years collectively. Thanks for watching Pacific Crime TV, and remember, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment on the channel if you enjoyed the video. See you next time.